Hello everyone and welcome to the prelims. Today we're going to be taking you through the fight night on January 15th, headlined by Chikadze and Calvin Kattar. But before we get into the card, let's go through some news and notes from over the holidays. First up, we have Kayla Harrison, who's still a free agent as of today. She made an appearance at UFC 270 when Juliana Pena defeated Amanda Nunes in what's now the third largest upset in UFC's betting history. The question everyone seems to be asking is whether the UFC is still interested in Kayla despite Amanda losing her bantamweight title, but I fail to see the relevance here. Sure, they've definitely lost out on a few pay-per-view points as Amanda loses the aura that surrounded her, and while she isn't the pound-for-pound number one fighter anymore, she remains the most accomplished female fighter in MMA with wins over Valentina, Cyborg, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, and Germaine de Randamie. The UFC doesn't have a women's lightweight division, and the featherweight division is being held together by double-sided tape and Amanda Nunes. Bellator doesn't exactly have a lightweight division either, but Cyborg has expressed interest in moving up to 155 to fight Harrison in the past. Where Kayla decides to go will really come down to how much she values the notoriety the top-tier promotions can give her versus how much the PFL is willing to pay to keep their star. Since the PFL's roster isn't exactly star-studded like the UFC's, or even Bellator's for that matter, they can spend on the fighters that grow their brand. I believe Kayla will choose the UFC, at least on a short-term contract, and do what she needs to do to become the number one pound-for-pound fighter in women's MMA. Moving on to the mess that is the lightweight division, where there seems to be questions around every single fighter in the top 10. Let's start with Dustin Poirier, who recently said he's not sure if he'll ever cut down to 155 pounds again. Considering he supposedly walks around at 184 while Covington walks around at 182, it's a no-brainer for Poirier to move up to 170 if the cut is starting to affect his energy inside the octagon. God only knows how much I've wanted to see Covington fight Dustin Poirier in the past. Both guys are absolute dogs in the octagon. That would even open up a potential fourth fight with McGregor at a new weight class if he wants it. Hopefully Dustin doesn't think the 170-pound belt will get any easier than the 155-pound belt. I'd say that only holds true if Kamaru loses it to someone outside of Khamzat Chimaev or Colby Covington, because all three of them would be incredibly tough fights for Dustin. Back to McGregor for a second. He's starting to look like the gorilla he has tattooed on his chest. He's blown up pretty significantly, and while he's saying he's next in line for the lightweight belt, he looks more like he's getting ready for another bout at 170. Charlie Olives is starting to get on board with McGregor's callouts and knows he'll make more from a red panty night with Conor than a brawl with Justin Gaethje. Dana White has confessed that McGregor gets special treatment for bringing in the big bucks, and Gaethje should have every right to be pissed if McGregor gets the title shot over him. If the UFC wants to become more of an official sports league run by an invisible hand of unbiased intentions, Gaethje is absolutely the next fighter on the list that deserves a title shot. Anyone saying he recently lost a title fight so he doesn't deserve one, his loss was to Khabib, and I don't see Khabib anywhere on the UFC's roster anymore. Do you? No. And pipe down, you Makhachev fanboys. He'll get his turn. We all know the UFC is willing to put the division on hold for a super fight with one of their prize fighters from time to time, and this wouldn't surprise me at all if it happens here. How they aren't marketing Justin Gaethje better, though, will always confuse me. The guy really is a human highlight reel. On to returning fighters in 2022, today is 693 without seeing Jon Jones in the UFC's octagon. Who knows when he'll be back, but I'm sure it'll be for the title whenever it does happen. Is 2 years enough time to move up to 265 from 205? I wouldn't know, but I do know that Daniel Cormier could do it overnight with some Popeye's chicken, so let's hurry up with this, John. Yuanion Jacek was recently featured on the UFC Fight Pass homepage with a Year of the Fighter special episode. Hopefully this means we can expect a return from her in early 2022. I'm itching to see her head blow up like a balloon again in a rematch with Zhang Weili. And lastly, if you're finding yourself asking, where does Kevin Lee fit into all this? He's recently signed on to Khabib's new promotion, Eagle FC, as the first member of their light welterweight division at 165 pounds. Good move for Khabib to create this niche market for 165-pound fighters, much like PFL has for 155 women's lightweight division. This could be enough to draw in fighters that have been clamoring for it for what feels like decades in these higher-end promotions. Speaking of women, Khabib currently has no plans for any women's divisions in Eagle FC. Ladies, if you want that, get after him on Twitter. All right, on to the card. First up, we've got Kattar versus Chikadze. This one's going to be tough to predict. Neither Calvin Kattar or Chikadze have been knocked out in their careers, and both average a knockout at least every other fight. Let's quickly recap what happened each fighter the last time they entered the octagon to end up here. Giga was able to outstrike the resurging 145-pound Edson Barboza, and his kicks were on full display. His patented Giga kick was effective for controlling the distance when he threw it, but he didn't rely on the liver strikes as much as he had in previous fights. The accuracy from Chikadze was very impressive throughout the fight, but especially in the third round when he was able to land 77% of his significant strikes. Accuracy has always been an important part of Chikadze's game, just as when he fought Cub Swanson and got a knockdown with a single kick to his liver. He doesn't seem to have much of a ground game at all, but it's not like Kattar does either, so Giga will probably be okay sitting back against the fence and waiting for the open counter shots. He's never gone to the championship rounds before, and he has seemed to fade in round 3 in the past fights. It'll be interesting to see how Giga fares in the 4th and 5th if the fight goes the distance. Kattar, on the other hand, has gone the 5-round distance 3 times in his career, walking away with the W twice and barely walking away with his life after the 3rd. Seriously, I have no idea how he survived that fight with Holloway. I don't believe Giga Chikadze will match Holloway's pressure or output in there, or even Zabit's pressure for that matter. Kattar's tough and definitely has the endurance to make it through all 5 rounds against Chikadze. He should have many opportunities to close the gap and phone booth box with Giga throughout the match. I wouldn't say either fighter has much of a stylistic advantage here, yet the odds are currently sitting around plus 195 to minus 250 with Kattar as the underdog. This should be a really close fight, and while neither of them have been knocked out before, with the types of brawls these two are prone to, I feel like this will finally be the one to end one of their conscious streaks. Up next, we have Chikadze and Jennifer Maia. The women's flyweight division isn't exactly one of the most exciting ones out there, with Valentina Shevchenko shooing away contender after contender, and here we're presented with 2 of her more recent victims in Jennifer Maia and Chikadze. These two fought back in November 2019, and I've got a feeling this fight will follow a similar path to that one. I won't lie to you, I'm not expecting any fireworks here. In Chikadze's last 13 trips to the octagon, 11 have gone to a decision, and 75% of her fights overall have gone to a decision. Jennifer Maia is more or less in the same boat. In the last 6 times she's gone to the UFC's octagon, 5 of them have gone via decision. 58% of her overall fights have also gone to a decision. Both women have backgrounds in BJJ, Catlin a brown belt, Maia her black belt. Catlin won't get to use it much unless Maia takes her down, since she's only been able to take down Antonia Shevchenko in her entire UFC career so far. But when Maia took Chikadze down last time, she wasn't able to get out from under Maia and didn't really seem to try given the timing of it. Neither has much power in their punches, so if you want to make a rather dull fight a little more exciting and bet that this will go the distance, the odds are in your favor. The next fight is a really tough one to call. We've got Brandon Royval and Rogerio Bontorin. Wrestlers have been so dominant lately and favored in getting decisions, I would avoid betting against any of them. Bontorin is a pretty competent grappler. While he was out-grappled by Ray Borg, he has been able to use it successfully in the cage against Raulian Paiva, Matt Schnell, and Kai Kara-France. It's a strong aspect of his game, and he shouldn't have any difficulty using it in his fight with Brandon Royval. Royval is taken down in fights pretty consistently. He defends the takedowns about half the time, and Bontorin is about as successful with his takedown attempts as Tim Elliott, who managed to get Brandon to the mat 4 times in their fight. The trouble for Bontorin this time will be dealing with someone who's a threat on their back and very good at getting back on their feet. Royval has 8 submission wins out of his total 12. Royval isn't solely a grappling threat. He hits decently hard for a flyweight, isn't afraid to throw in some unexpected knees, more so when he's in the clinch of course, and does pretty well with his combos. I think Royval is the better fighter overall, but if Bontorin can play to the judges and control Royval against the cage instead of taking him to the ground, it could be trouble for him. My money's staying far away from this fight too. It's way too unpredictable, especially with the way judging has gone lately. It seems that just holding somebody against the cage is enough to win a fight nowadays, so I'm not touching this fight with a 12-foot pole. Next up, we've got Michel Pereira and Muslim Salikov. First things first, Salikov definitely lost to Zaleski dos Anjos, without a doubt in my mind. If anyone wants to comment on that, go nuts. I don't care. I don't agree. He lost. Salikov doesn't do anything exceptionally well. His fundamentals are really strong, though. Good hands, good at controlling the distance, constantly moving in and out as he attacks, never stays in the pocket longer than he needs to, doesn't take any unnecessary damage, and this is exactly what you need to do to be a good fighter. Pereira has been the exact opposite at times, and it'll be exciting to see how Salikov reacts to Pereira's nonsense. Pereira is a much more active fighter, averaging more strikes, more takedown attempts per fight than Salikov. He's still learning what kind of fighter he is. He's far from what he was when he fought Tristan Connolly, but can he be effective enough to win the first couple of rounds and stay active for round 3? He certainly was effective enough against Nico Price to win the first 2 rounds, but as usual, he was pretty gassed and exposed at the end of the second round and certainly in the third. Salikov would be able to take full advantage of Pereira in that state in the second and third. This really is a battle of someone that fights by the book and someone that's as unorthodox as they come. I'll be rooting for Pereira, but Salikov might prove to be too much for him once Pereira gets tired. For this bantamweight fight, we've got Said Yakub Kakramanov and Brian Kelleher. Said Yakub is an up-and-coming 135-pounder making his second trip to the octagon after winning his debut on short notice. It'll be good to see what he can do after a full camp at the right weight. Brian Kelleher is certainly more experienced than Said Yakub's last opponent, Trevin Jones, and has had more success with takedowns in recent fights. But Kakramanov still has a much better overall skill set than Kelleher. Kakramanov was able to defend Jones's takedown attempts really well, with inside sweeps and reversals throughout their fight, and I expect that to happen here as well. He's shown that he can threaten submissions from different levels, and has pretty good hands, as you could see in his last Cage Warriors fight before coming to the UFC. I think the betting split here could actually be a lot wider than it currently is, with Kakramanov's applied odds around 62%. I may jump in with this one. 5 newcomers will be making their UFC debuts on the 15th as well. We've got 10-1 Caio Borrello, who's currently lined up to fight Jamie Pickett, I think. I hope it's not Joseph Holmes, but as long as it's still Caio Borrello, we'll include this. I've seen Betway still has his name. MyBookie doesn't have his name. SureDog doesn't have his name. UFC hasn't confirmed the fight at all, so not sure if he's going to be fighting, but it should be a pretty easy win for him. He fought twice on Dana White's Contender Series, winning both times. During his introduction on the show, they spoke about how he's a man-made lefty after watching the success Conor McGregor had in the cage. In fact, his fighting stance and even his outstretched hand is reminiscent of Conor's style. We'll see how he does, but I have hope for him at least in his debut. Victor Henry is also making his UFC debut, and while he's certainly the more experienced fighter between him and Caio Borrello, he has a much tougher matchup against Randy Barcelos. Henry was the number 1 ranked bantamweight in Japan, even beat Kyler Phillips not too long ago. The problem here is that Randy really does seem to be better in every category. I'm high on both guys for whatever time they have left in the UFC, given they're both 34 years old, but Randy should be able to shut the door on this one. Vyacheslav Borachev is one of the best at changing levels when striking that I've seen in a while. His love for the liver shot can only be matched by his love for Uriah Faber's gym. Training with Team Alpha Male, Slava has worked on his grappling skills to balance with his years of kickboxing training. His combinations are quick, methodical, his counters are out quick, his hands stay up while he's throwing his shot. This guy's going to be fun to watch. Slava seems wholesome as fuck with that devastating smile and wave he gives as his name gets announced. That menacing stare is probably why he's the overwhelming favorite in this fight. His opponent, Dakota Bush, will be making his second appearance in the UFC's octagon, and while he's quick on his feet as well, his ground control leaves a lot to be desired. He may have 4 wins via submission, but when they're all rear naked chokes, you have to wonder if that just means he's quick rather than a mastermind on the ground. If Slava's made any progress with his wrestling or grappling and can keep this fight standing, he shouldn't have much of a problem winning here. Now, Klidson Rodriguez is also making his debut. He fought in Dana White's Contender Series. We saw a lot of Klidson's abilities to control his opponent standing and in the clinch. He certainly dominated his fight in the Contender Series with a lot of octagon control, but we didn't see very much from him in that fight, and he'll be looking to put his skill set on display for everyone in his upcoming fight against 4-3 Zaruk Adashev. Last up, we've got Joe Anderson Brito, who won his last fight on Dana White's Contender Series back in Week 1 against Diego Lopez. He was aggressive right out of the gate, not afraid to take down somebody who is a submission specialist on his back. So the guy is an absolute madman and hits like a truck. Hopefully he does well in his UFC debut. I'd love to see more of this guy absolutely attack people the way he did Diego Lopez. As for the rest of the card, there's Chase Sherman and Jake Collier. Jake Collier just lost to Carlos Felipe a little while ago. I have no expectations for him for the rest of his career now. Buckley will be taking on Abdul Al-Hassan. Buckley will always be known for his spinning back kick knockout against Impa Kasanganay, but he may be more of a flash in the pan than a serious contender for this division. I think his ceiling has basically been met at this point. And that's about it for the notables, a few other prelim dwellers, but nothing to note as of yet. I'm going to leave it there with that. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you really enjoyed it, hit subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see y'all at the next event.